The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webcast today on cybersecurity. Thank you all for joining. I apologize for being a few minutes late. I had a few technical difficulties, but we'll go ahead and get started straight away. My name is Pam Misialek, and I am with Njevity, the makers of PowerGP Online. And I've been in the community for over 23 years. And today we'll be focusing on cybersecurity and making sure that you can keep your Dynamics UP environment as safe as possible. I have a lot of content today, so I'm going to kind of skip some of these formalities and kind of move on to some of the good stuff. So today we're going to talk about identifying threats, how to secure your perimeter, securing your network, securing your data, talking about passwords, protecting against phishing attacks, and then we'll close out talking about what if. What if you do get attacked? What happens next? There is a question and manager pane. If you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the question and manager, and we'll answer those at the end of the webcast. So the world has become a very scary place. I'm sure most of you on the call today have seen and heard of some of these high-profile breaches that's happened in the last couple of years. It hits mainline news. Everyone talks about it. You've probably gotten notices from some of these vendors that your accounts may have been hacked, or your personal information may have been shared to some of these bad actors. What's also scary about this is that a lot of times it's smaller companies where they don't hit the news. It's small and medium-sized businesses that are being attacked as well, and they're not sharing it. It doesn't make the news, but it is a thing that happens every single day. So it has become a scary place, and it's something that we just need to be really vigilant about. Probably the largest trend that I've seen in the last year has been an uptick on ransomware attacks. So ransomware is where they attack a computer or a server, and they encrypt it so you can't get access to it, and then they send you a ransom note saying if you want your data back, you need to pay us X dollars of money. A couple of years ago, these didn't happen often, but when they did, it would usually attack, like it would get to like your local computer, and it would say something like, $100 and you can get your computer back, and then you decide, is the information worth it or not. Nowadays, they've gotten much more sophisticated, and the dollar amount is much more important. So rather than them just finding a lonely computer, in a household, they're trying to find, what's the ones that are worth $1 million. What are the where's the data that's worth a serious amount of money? And I'm going to spend time and effort targeting that rather than $100 here and there. So they're going after the bigger fishes. They're going after servers. They're going after company data instead. And here's a few of the ransomware attacks that has made the news in the last year or so. A lot of these are sophisticated. So what they do is they come in and you don't even know they're there, and they slowly just encrypt little pieces because they don't want you to know that they're there until they have something that's very, very valuable to you. So they are super sophisticated. Chances are they could be running for weeks in your environment before you even know it's a problem, which makes it really hard to recover from them, which is why they ask for a lot of money and then people consider paying that. Here's an example of one that just happened the other day. I know Steve Endow on Twitter had emailed or tweeted about this. So if you're in our community, you might have already heard about this. But here's one where they hired a ransomware, a cybersecurity consultant to negotiate for them, and they ended up paying $400,000 to get rid of this infection. And I mean, that's a lot of money. The other problem with a lot of these ransomware attacks is, they got in And so even if you pay the ransom, they're they still have the ability to re-ransom you, and there is no guarantee that you'll actually get your data back usually. Or they can wait 6 months and ransom you again. So if you did get hit by ransomware and you did actually pay, I would recommend you're still going to pretty much level your whole hardware and start over again, because you don't know exactly how they got in, because it's really usually hard to find. And the guarantee that you are going to be clean forever is no longer there. So you're still going to have to recover from that vulnerability. And normally people say don't pay the ransom, because the more that they win, the more of these bad actors win, the more often they're going to do it, because this is their revenue stream. So they're thinking of this as a business to say, where is my revenue stream coming from and what's viable? And if people keep paying it, then they're going to be like, oh, I'm going to go do this again. Even though it could be painful. Like in that case, I mean, they might have been, down for a year. So it was worth for them to spend money and get their key systems back up and running. It's just a scary place. So there's also processor vulnerabilities. There's been a few in the news in the last couple of years. These are things that are usually taken care of by Microsoft and your hardware vendors. Okay, so there's a few other things that are going on in the world today. There are state-sponsored hacking, which is like foreign countries hiring hackers to get data about U.S. residents or government agencies and things like that is going on. Some of these are conspiracy theories, but a lot of them are real, and as well as just a proliferation of viruses and malware, and which is usually malware is the vessel that ransom attacks use to get their ransom attack inside of a server or inside of an environment is through a malware. And then phishing attacks have been just increasing. I read an article last week that Office 365 said they've had a 255% increase in phishing attacks through the Office 365 accounts. And really related to that, why they're increasing is because apparently they work, and they are targeted to exploit the weakest link in your organization. They're targeted for someone who's uneducated, they have an email account, and they click on a link. So they're simple in their mindset. They're not as sophisticated as a ransomware, but they work because they're getting better and better at making them look real. And then staying protected is more complex than ever, of course, because of all these different things. And what worked last month, they'll come up with something new next month. So they're always re-engineering and revamping their strategies, and really trying to run their business in a different way, which these bad actors are getting very good at it. On a side note, if you are on Office 365, there is an option to do some fake phishing attacks. So you can engineer them yourself and do fake phishing attacks to test your employees and test the people at the organization, or do some type of training to help prevent that. And it's a free service that comes with Office 365. There's also things you can buy online that will do it as well, or services that you can buy as well related to that to help educate. But the biggest tip I have throughout this entire hour we get to spend today is education, because they do try to target the weakest link, and it's all about people. They're not hacking software, they're hacking people. And we just have to make sure that everybody in the entire company is vigilant. Okay, so let's move on. Let's talk about securing your perimeter. Physical security is fairly obvious, but it is often really overlooked. I bet a lot of you who have your accounting software on premise, you probably have your server in maybe the CFO's office under their desk, or in an IT room of some kind. But it's usually not in a secure place. So someone, if they really wanted to, they could just go into your office and grab the hard drive and be on their way. Or their physical access to your office is just usually overlooked. So it'd be a simple way for someone to get involved. And that's the easy way to get past your firewalls, is just to walk into your office and just grab a machine. So again, this is just about being vigilant. It's about training your people. So you want to make sure people stop and they talk to strangers. If you see someone in your office that you've never seen before, stop and talk to them. Don't let people, if you do have security with, scan cards to get in and things like that, make sure that people are using them and they're not letting other people in without verifying who they are. Since a lot of people, like even us, we have a shared space. We don't own our whole building, so there's people coming and going all the time that are coming into the building and going to other businesses. So it's just something to just keep an eye on. Another one, pretty obvious, but lock your computer. So when you leave your desk, do lock it, even to go to the bathroom, because you have a computer that is open, someone could come by and they could get in and they could get all your passwords. They could change their passwords. They could get access to your sensitive accounting data. And then that's an easy way for them to do a more solid breach after they leave. So that you may not even know that they were there if you're being targeted as a company. But let's move on, because those are some of the things that everyone should do, but it's probably the least of our problems at this point. So let's talk about securing your network. Securing your network is all about firewalls. It's the heart of any type of cyber security threat protection plan. If you have like a router or a wireless router, that's not a firewall. And if that's what you're using to protect your network, your network's not protected at all. So you'll want to be really careful about that. But there are a lot of firewalls out there. It can be a very complicated world. I've done some research just for our own protection at Njevity, and there's a lot of different appliances out there. But I would recommend, if you are going to make sure that your walls are secure, that there's part of picking like your endpoint protections and your firewalls. But I would usually, unless you have someone who's really, really good at this, I would hire it out, and I'd hire a security expert to come in and get your stuff set up. Especially if you're an on-premise customer and you're not in the cloud, because if you're in the cloud, your cloud provider will do that for you, so you don't have to worry about it. But it's usually something that's ever-changing and it's complicated, and if you really don't understand it, you're not doing it right. So I've always said it's kind of like your company is like a castle. So you build the thick walls and you have the moat and all the things to protect yourself. But if you leave the front door open and they can walk right in, it's not going to help you. But if you are going to do it yourself, you want to pick a firewall that's a hardware appliance. Something big enough that it can handle like twice your user count, so double the size that you are, and it includes endpoint protection, because that's usually the place where people are going to get in, is your different endpoints. So you'll want to make sure that your endpoints have antivirus, anti-malware protection, that they do deep packet inspection, and it just helps you with intrusion prevention. So, because that's usually where they would get in, unless you're targeted in a very specific way. Usually they're just randomly trying to hit you. If they want to actually breach you, then they're going to try a few other things, like with getting access to a username and password. But it's really important that you do secure your firewall. It's the heart of your system. So I've talked about most of these already. And then the other thing to consider is a managed service. So if you are a smaller, mid-sized business, and let's say your server that runs your accounting is sitting under your desk right now, I would definitely consider a managed service. There's IT companies that you can hire that they'll come in and just take care of this. You pay them like per month, or you pay them contractually, and they come in and they just take care of it for you. Or you hire someone that really understands this, and then also give them the time to keep up on the latest methods, because this is ever changing and the options that you have change on a regular basis. Okay, so let's move on. Let's talk about securing your data. So to secure your data, you want it to, there's two types of encryption. The first one let's talk about is in motion. So when your data is moving across the internet, that's usually where it's the most vulnerable. So you'll want to make sure that when your data is in motion, that's, of course, it's encrypted. You'll want to make sure that you have a secure socket layer certificates that are the most secure. They're kind of unhackable. So you'll want to make sure, because this will protect you from sniffing, which is when you're moving data across your pipe, across the internet, bad actors they'll try to just sniff out and see if they can get just even a packet, get a little nugget of data, get a little nugget of something. Like I said, these people are really sophisticated, so they know they're not going to get, here's my sysadmin account with my username and login and everything. They're going to get little bits of information to see, because they're hacking people. So the more information they can get about you, the easier it is for them to get into your systems. Again, most systems already have this protected, but you'll want to think about this as beyond just your like dynamic GP data. You want to be thinking about Word documents, Excel sheets, and other things like that you would want to make sure that are secured. Okay, next there's at-rest encryption. So this is protects your data like sitting on a disk, sitting on a drive somewhere. In this, you want to make sure that, let's say someone steals your laptop. You need to make sure they can't log into your laptop, get access to your data without your credentials. But I've seen examples before where they do that and they just take the hard drive out of your laptop. So they don't actually need your credentials, because they're just going to take the drive out. Anyway, so you also want to make sure that you have your drive actually encrypted. Microsoft has BitLocker, there's FileVault, there's others as well. They're free. So this will just keep it so it gives you that extra layer of protection, because that might be a way of, through an unsecured laptop, is an easier way than trying to hack directly to an actual server. So it just is another method. But you'll want to make sure that you, and not just you, but everyone in the company is encrypting their hard drives. And they keep their encryption keys, because it is kind of unhackable when it's encrypted, and you will not get access to it if they forget they're in, or they don't hang on to their encryption key. But this will protect you against a data breach. Okay, let's talk about passwords. Like I've said before, hackers hack people, which means they hack passwords based on personal information. So it's really, really important that you put in some password policies and password management theories in place. So, of course, don't keep your password on a sticky note or on your monitor or under your desk or in a drawer or in your wallet or purse. But I know people do that, so there are other protections around that. We use a password manager. There's a few that I listed here, like Dashlane, 1Password, LastPath. A lot of them, they're pretty relatively inexpensive to use, and they work really, really well. And this is where, like, we use it at our company, where we can share passwords with each other, and then they're in that secure vault. And so it does really mitigate risk of using a manager like that. So I'd strongly recommend that you would use that for passwords. We already said lock your computer when you're away from it. But with the password management, a lot of this is, it's interesting, because I've done it. I'm sure everyone on the call has done it as well today, as well, is that, let's say you have to reset your password, and maybe when you have a setting to reset every 3 months or something like that, and then maybe your password was something, and then it had 88 or 99, and then when you have to change it, you just change it to 77 or something like that. So it's basically the same password. It's just a little bit different, and hackers love that. They love repetitive things. They love it when people are consistent that way, because it makes it a lot easier for them to hack you, because they can maybe find an old password of some kind, and then they can just make iterations of that, and it makes it easier for them to get in. So password policies. These are the old standard password policies that have been around forever. The National Institute for Standards and Technology, which does recommendations on passwords, says don't do these anymore. They are not secure, because hackers know these types of guidelines and have written algorithms and ways to secure or to get passwords and steal them. So you don't want to force a password every 30 to 90 days. Like the mix of upper, lower letter, number, punctuation. I'll talk in a minute some examples of why that doesn't work well, because they're hard for. So basically, what's wrong with these passwords is it's easy for a hacker to guess what it is, but it's hard for you to remember. And there's easier ways of doing it, or better ways of doing it. So, like, here's an example of easier to remember. So, like on the top, a lot of people, what they'll do, or it's been very common for years, is you'll have a word, and then for an O, you turn it to a 0, or an E, you turn it into a 3. They put those into their algorithm just to check all of that. So they use a standard word with a capital letter that's usually the first letter of that word, and then do those common substitutions. And based on that, with 1,000 guesses per second in these algorithms that they have, it'll take a couple days for them to crack your password if you stay in that same pattern. And it's hard to remember, because you're like, oh my, unless you do it consistently every single time and everyone does it that same way, which then causes even a bigger problem, because now you're sharing it everywhere. So it just is super easy for them to hack. But if you did the bottom one, where you did like 4 random words that are common random words, this would be extremely, extremely hard for them to guess this, because they're not going to get these 4 random words from knowing you to understanding your company, and they're words that do not relate to one another. So you don't want to do like a movie tagline, or a movie title, or a book title, or anything like that, or a saying. You stick away from those, and you really find common random words. It makes it super, super hard for them to guess, but it's easy to remember, because you're like, oh, that's right, correct Taurus battery staple, and it'll be super hard for them. So our recommendation with password policies is don't change your password unless you feel like you've had a breach and there's a need to change them. Once you move to this harder thing to manage. I know most websites have the standard, capital letter punctuation of some kind, type rules. So you have to you fall into that pattern. But this is another reason why like a password manager is great, because they have random password and they store that, and you don't need to know what it is, because you just need to know your one password for the password manager. But then they make these really long machine run passwords that are impossible to crack. So that's another reason for using that. Okay, so there's guidelines. If you went to the NIST website, there's other password phrase guidelines. We take a look at it, a couple times a year, just to see what other tidbits or other things have changed, because this is an ever-changing world in the world of cybersecurity. So we do recommend you only force a change after a breach. So don't bother doing the 30 or 60, 90-day forced change policy, because like I said, people are just going to add some numbers or kind of change a little bit and won't change enough to actually protect you from a breach. So only do it when you've suspected a breach, or something specific's happened that would force you into it. Again, no more complex passwords. Keep it simple, keep it long, and keep it memorable. So like 4 words is usually a good rule of thumb. I know it might take you a little bit longer to type in if you're not using a password manager, but it'll help you in the long run. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so some other password policies or some other password options. Multi-factor authentication brings you to the next level in security. So what multi-factor is, it's you have your password that you type in, and then it will also like call you on your phone as well. So then you have that 2-step authentication. So if you do have a lot of people that they keep their sticky notes at their desk and they have it in their drawer and all of that, that's fine because they're going to have to call that person. The drawback to this is what if they leave their phone at home? They're like, I can't log in because I left my phone at home, and that's their second authentication option. So there's things like that where you'll have to make sure you have controls in place and you set expectations on things, but it is significantly more secure because of that 2-step authentication. So there's some of the user type problems you'd have from an IT perspective. If you're going to move into this world, not every product enables multi-factor authentication. We can enable it on our side through like if you're going to do an RDP session, you can do multi-factor to get in to your RDP session is an option. I know Office has multi-factor options as well, but depending on what your overall end-to-end solution and all your business applications are, there could be some that don't have that ability to do multi-factor. So it's something to keep in mind. So you kind of know what your security footprint really is and how secure you are. Azure has multi-factor authentication. So then it uses an app that's installed on the mobile device of the user. So it's something that you could do as well if you are doing Azure. I know PowerGP Online, we have an Azure-based model, and then we also have a private server model as well. So with that, there's just options depending on what you really need and how far you want to take your security. Okay, so let's talk about phishing because it's the thing that happens all the time, and I mean sometimes they're pretty good examples. And so this is back to finding the weakest link in your organization, or the person that's not trained well, who doesn't know or understand, and that's who these hackers are trying to get to. There's been some data breaches, even in our community in the ERP world recently, and it's something where they got in with a low level credential and then they were able to get a higher level credential while they sat there. They just sat there and they kind of just waited and waited and waited and waited. And then all of a sudden, they were getting like a sysadmin type access. And so that's how they're patient. They're very, very patient and they're sophisticated. So that's why we want to make sure that people are vigilant. So here's a few tips and examples that could trick people into clicking the link, because having an email won't hurt you. Clicking a link on the email is what is going to cause you a lot of problems. So in here, what you want to do is you always want to hover over any link, make sure it's going to go to where it really says it's going to go. Like in this link, if you hovered over it, it really is going to take you here, which is not where you want to be. You also want to look at it because a lot of these are written by people who English isn't their first language. So there's usually some type of grammar mistakes. The wording isn't the same words that like in this case, like would the office team really send you an email that would say this? So some of it's common sense, some of it's just being logical about it, but they are kind of tricky. So you want to make sure that it just hits, it makes your gut check with anything, like especially like your password set to expire. You're like, it is? I mean, because this is normally not what they would send. Here's another example. Where, again, click, highlight, hover over the link, see where it's actually going. Check to see like Microsoft message delivery, delivery failure. Would Microsoft really send a message like that in that way? Because you would never click that to resend emails. I mean, that's not something that Microsoft would ever do. So it's just another example of you click on that link and now you just subject yourself to a cyber attack. Here's another one. You have a parcel on hold, FedEx Express. You'll notice it's a little bit, FedEx is off, and submit your correct delivery address here. Normally, you would never do that, of course. So those are a few examples, but let me show you one since I just happened to get it today. Since we get this quite often, depending on the person in our organization, some get phishing attack emails like every single day. Others get them, every once in a while. Most of them go into that unfocused folder or into a junk mail. But here's an example of one that came and that got sent to the Njevity team. What's great, or what we put practices in place, is when something comes in like this, especially if it's one that is kind of tricky, or you look at it and you're like, wait, what? We communicate with each other. So in this case, Tudor Coleman, who is at Njevity, he emailed the whole team saying, hey, this is phishing. Don't click on any of this. Granted, if you looked at it, you'd probably notice that, yeah, this doesn't quite look right. Because granted, like full team at Njevity.com is like our team alias. It's not a specific person. Best regard, Microsoft and Njevity team. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. But it's just an example of something that is prevalent. It's increasing every single day. But this is just one that just happened to come today, so I thought I'd share it with the group. Another example, which is one that I want to call out because it was a real threat that I think could have really attacked us. The owner of Njevity does wire transfers all the time, and we have an accountant, and she does them. But we transfer money. I mean, I think almost all businesses do that. And the accountant got an email saying, hey, can you transfer this money to here? And it's something that she normally would have done. But the dollar amount was kind of an even dollar amount. It was a fairly high dollar amount. And so she just called him and said, hey, did you really want me to send this money over to this other place? And because he was out of the office at the time, and he was like, no, not at all. And so they spoofed his email, so it looked like it came from him. It looked totally legitimate. It was just great that our accountant had the right training to kind of look out for something that just didn't seem quite right and to question it. So the best way to protect you from a cyber attack is have your people communicating with each other. They're aware of it. They pick up the phone and they verify things. So it could be like that. That was like an internal thing that we ran into. I've talked with other people in our community about examples like this. I mean, some of them are like a vendor calling them and saying, hey, I got this. Why do you need this money? Which is great that they called, and they're like, I never sent that to you. So it's really, really common nowadays, and apparently it must really work because it's becoming more and more and more prevalent in the world today. So just be careful. Those are just a few examples of how you can protect yourself. Okay, so next, phishing attacks. You can report phishing attacks. You can send them depending on what they are. You can report them. To be honest, nothing really happens when you report them, but it is an option. Again, back to the hackers like to. I mean, granted, yes, they're in it to make money and steal money from people, but they also like it, and that's why they like it when mid-market companies don't talk about ransomware attacks that they've experienced, or it's not in the news because they want to stay under the radar. They want to do these phishing attacks and not be reported for it because it makes their job a lot easier to do. And so by reporting it, at least it's documented and it's something that we can, as a group, all learn more about it. So this is where you can go to report attacks. And it's something also like I've been trying to talk to our like Dynamics GP community to say, how do we as a group communicate? Like like, here's the latest phishing attack and what it looked like, and here's the latest ransomware chains, and how to prevent that, and just different things. Another example is like cybersecurity insurance. We have insurance for cybersecurity at Njevity. I mean, we are a cloud provider. We also hire hackers to try to penetrate our systems to make sure they're secure. But those things are really, really expensive. So a typical mid-market type customer who has their data on premises probably can't take that cost and be able to go to those lengths to make sure that they're secure. But they can get educated and they can learn about more things. And so an example is cybersecurity insurance. I was doing it because we have a policy, and I've been researching it to find out what would happen if we had to use this policy and how would it really work. And I just did some research around other examples, like people who got denied claims, and because it was maybe a terrorist attack, and terrorist attacks aren't covered, and there's always those fine lines with insurances. So if you are investigating insurances back to what do you do if it happens to you? What if you do really get attacked and someone gets access to your sensitive information, something that's extremely important to you? What do you really do? Cyber insurance is one option you can do as a proactive method. Just be careful and read the dotted lines and make sure, based on what you're paying, how that would work, because you'd hate to have it and then when you try to make a claim, you can't, or they have a clause or something to get out of it. So first off, building your castle, like I talked about before, is extremely important. The best way to protect yourself from a cyber attack is to make sure you don't get one. Is make really thick walls, have super good firewalls, educated people, making sure that your castle is as strong as possible, and that you even have like multi-layers of threat protection. That you have super secure endpoints, you have monitoring systems to monitor in case someone does get in, or if someone tried even and you stop them. You really, really want to do that. I'd recommend probably hiring someone to help you do this. You can, unless you have a pretty sophisticated IT department, and you can enable them or allow them to have additional time to be able to really think this through and build it out and get the right tools in place. Because once they're in, that scary world becomes front and center. So let's talk a little bit more about these. So next would be disaster recovery. So disaster recovery, there's like cold failover, there's warm failover, or there's hot failover. There's a lot of terms around disaster recovery. The problem with disaster recovery systems today, and they have disaster recovery as a service, so you can hire a cloud service where you actually have a hot failover, so you can click a button and within a few minutes, you're up and running over somewhere else, in a different environment. The problem with that is they use replication. So if you got a ransomware attack, that ransomware is going to get replicated to your disaster recovery area, and now you have ransomware in both places. So it's not really going to help you from a cyber attack specifically. It will help you from a natural disaster, a hardware failure, anything like that, which is kind of the 1% or 0.001% likeliness of that happening. But the systems are there, so it will give you that peace of mind. It'd be something where you can click a button, you can move, depending on where you live in the world. That might be a really interesting idea. These disaster recovery systems are extremely expensive, especially based on a return on investment of when you'd actually use them. So I think there's other ways you can protect yourself, just because most of the time the replication is going to bring your ransomware right along with it, so it's not really going to matter. But you can do like a cold failover where maybe it's not a true replication that it replicates all the time, but you can have a failover. Again, even a cold failover, if you're looking at like Azure or any type of cloud failover, it's usually pretty expensive to do. So not everybody can do it, but there's some other strategies you can use as a business instead, or you can complement, and you could have more than one strategy as well. But the options are available. And if anyone on the call today wants more information, you can feel free to ping me directly, and I can give you some advice from the deep research we've been doing around this topic for quite some time now. But since it doesn't protect you from a cyber attack, probably the next important piece is, what is your backup strategy? I mean, everyone does backups. I'm sure you do. Everyone does backups. But when was the last time you actually tested a backup and made sure that it worked? And not just restored it, but actually restored it and had someone log in, like for your GP backups, had someone restore it to a test company, log in and make sure that it actually really, really worked. Chances are a lot of people on this call haven't done that at all, or maybe it's been a year, but they're doing backups. The other thing is, where are your backups stored? So if back to ransomware loves to get access. I mean, it encrypts files. So your SQL database, I mean, it's gonna get your GP files and it'll encrypt them. It could encrypt like your backup files as well. And so, and it slowly kind of just digs around, and then hopefully what it really, really likes is if you have a shared network share that it can see, because then it'll bounce to that and then it'll start encrypting that stuff too. So it can kind of spread through like a virus and go through depending on how your systems are set up. And so with backups, it's also important, I mean, even to go old school, do a backup, put it on a drive, set it up on a shelf, because then ransomware can't get to it. Because I mean, really, anything that's hooked to the internet is subject to a ransom attack. And we're not going to unplug the internet, and you're not going to like do that. So there are ways that you can have backups where like you can have it in a separate location, you can have it part of a separate network. There's online backups tools that are available. You can do Azure backups as well. The online tools, depending on the size of your data and how often and how long you want it to keep them, can get expensive. So you'll just want to make sure you think smart about it and think about it long term. What we do as a backup strategy is we do daily backups every single day. We keep them for 28 days, for a month. And then we also do weekly backups for 4 weeks. And then we do monthly backups, for 12 months. And then we do 7 yearly backups, up to 7 years. A lot of that's for long-term retention, which if you got audited, they can audit up to 7 years back. So it's just protecting you so you could restore a database from 6 years ago. So we do all of those. We also do offsite backups, where we do backups that are on a drive that's like a kind of a local drive in our environment. We also store those offsite as well. So those are things that anybody can do, and it's really not that expensive. I mean, you can buy a drive from Best Buy or something and plug it in and do a backup, put it on that drive, and put it on a shelf or put it in a drawer somewhere, and that could be your cold failover type backup. I mean, it would be painful if you got attacked, but at least you'd be able to restore from something, and it wouldn't be that the entire environment was compromised. I know a few clients that I've worked with in the past have done backups that were related, where they had kind of a cold failover out like on Azure. So they had everything on-prem, but on Azure they basically set up their environment out there and then turned everything off. So then they could turn it back on and then just restore the backup and be back up and running if they needed to. So that is an option. There's a cost depending on how complicated your environment is. It could get expensive. If you're fairly simple, it's definitely a viable option to do. And since that's turned off, you're not going to be subject to a ransomware copying over to there. What's really strategic and important is that you have a clean backup of your data. Because again, these cyber attacks they get into your system and they're really quiet, so you don't know they're there. So it could be that they're in your system for 2 weeks before you find out that you have a problem, before you get the note that just says, haha, we got all your data, which isn't really haha, it's devastating. And so think about, from your backup strategies or any type of recovery strategy, make an assumption that they've been there for a while. Don't make an assumption that they come in and you're going to find out the same day and then you can just restore from last night's backup, because they've probably been there for a while, and it could be that all those 2 weeks of backups might be compromised, especially if they're just backups like inside your SQL SQL, just a SQL backup inside of your SQL server. So it's just something when you're thinking about your all strategy, make some of those assumptions of like the worst case scenario, because it would be really painful for most of you to have to go back 2 weeks and restore and try to recover from that. I mean, there's been worse cases out there that I've heard of, and where they're going back a month, they're going back 6 weeks. There's some that like their data is completely gone; they have nothing. I mean, and it's tough, but most of the time, I think if you do the right backups, you do them in the right way, you think about it, and you protect yourself the best, is what you'll have to do if it happens to you, is kind of rely on the plans that you've made and rely on what you currently have in place and kind of work the problem. We have at Njevity, we've done it with some where we call it life voting, where we just got them back up and running basic as quickly as possible so they could actually kind of run their business, since GP is usually is the glue that everything fits together in, and kind of assist. So that could be another strategy that you could put to protect yourself, is just to have, if we got attacked and our server is completely compromised and we need to go elsewhere, is there a cloud provider? Could I do AWS or Azure, or go to a cloud provider like us that would be able to just help you protect you? Also, that's probably the number one reason why I believe people should move to the cloud, is because our cloud is going to be more secure than any on-premise environment. We spend thousands and thousands of dollars on security, on testing security, on doing backups. The price points we pay on the cybersecurity is ridiculous. And it's something that I wouldn't think any on-premise customer would be able to do. So of course we're going to be more secure, because we have people, that's what they do for a living, and they do it really, really well. And so it's just really important, where a lot of people say, well, no, we're more secure on-prem because we're not in the cloud. I'm like, well, if you're connected to the internet, no one's safe. So anyway, I'm going to open up to questions and answers, but thank you for attending. My email address is here on this slide, so feel free if you have any questions or anything and you just want to ping me directly, we can talk more about this. Again, it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. It's something I've been spending a lot of time focused on and thinking about and researching around, because yeah, it's just ever-changing topic. So feel free to email me at any time if you have any further follow-ups or questions. But I'm going to move now to the question manager and see if we have any questions from the audience in the group today. And feel free, if you do have any questions, you can just go in the question manager and be able to type it in, and then I will answer them. But I'm not seeing any questions in the question manager, so feel free to email me later on if you have any questions or any other follow-ups. I hope this session was informative. Yeah, I hope you learned something in this webcast today. I hope that it informed you on the things about cyber attacks. I mean, this is something that we just covered the high-level surface of. It's something that we could drill in and drill in and drill in, and we could talk for days about this topic. So we did kind of a introductory level. If you want to go deeper, feel free to send an email to me and we can talk more. But thank you everyone for joining, and I hope you all have a great day.